Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Rich Allen and Jeremy Smith. I'd like to start tonight by saying all of us at the Get Football News team send our thoughts to the family, friends, and colleagues of 31-year-old Italian defender Davide Astori, who lost his life on Sunday morning. Riposi in pace, capitano. On to the weekend's news in Liga, at least. Lille sink further into the relegation mire on Friday as they lost 2-1 at Nice. Mario Balotelli scored the home side's 3,000th Ligue 1 goal, but they needed a strike from Willian Cyprian to 10 minutes from time to seal the victory. Elsewhere on Friday, Monaco had to come from behind to beat Bordeaux. Valentin Varda's wonderful effort against the run of play helped Les Girondins into the lead, but goals from Stefan Jovetic and Ronnie Lopez helped the Principality side tighten their grip on second place. On Saturday, Paris Saint-Germain prepared for their Real Madrid fixture with a solid 2-0 win over Troyes. Goalkeeper Erwin Zelazny, sorry, I'm never going to be able to pronounce that name, made a record 11 saves to keep the lead leaguers at bay, who gave a debut to the son of Ballon d'Or winner George Weah in USA Youth International Timothy Weah. In the multiplex, Angers secured their first back-to-back wins of the season by thumping Guingamp 3-0, as Toulouse had to save their own blushes by scoring in the final few minutes to gain a point against 10-man Metz. Rennes lifted themselves into fifth by winning 2-0 over Amiens at the weekend, while Saint-Etienne had to recover twice to draw 2-2 at home to Dijon. On Sunday, Caen eased any relegation fears they had by beating Strasbourg 2-0, while Lyon have now not won in 6 Liga matches as they drew 1-1 away to Montpellier. In the final game of the weekend, Marseille scored dramatically in stoppage time to earn a point at home to Nantes. Léo Dubois gave Le Canary an unlikely lead, but Florian Thauvin popped up yet again to keep L'OM at least in sight of the automatic Champions League spot. And that's all for now. But for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with PSG, who got another decent win in the league, but that's not really their focus at the moment because more importantly, they have a date with Destiny tomorrow night. Rich, it's a massive game, but the first question has to be really, and I think it's on everyone's lips, who replaces Neymar?
It's pretty much going to be a straightforward, isn't it? It's going to be Di Maria, who perhaps was a little unlucky in the first leg not to have got an opportunity. He's been in very, very good form in 2018. So it will be him, despite Christopher Nkunku putting in a pretty decent performance in a slightly out of position for him on the left at the weekend. But no, it could be Di Maria. It's going to be interesting to see how he fits in. It's obviously now a team minus its quote-unquote sort of football icon of this side, the Neymar PSG that this is. So, it will be interesting to see if Di Maria can carry that Ligue 1 form into Europe in what is undoubtedly their biggest game of the season so far. It's going to be a massive game, I think, with huge repercussions for some of the players in that squad, for Emery, and for sort of the direction of PSG going forward. A win there to come back from 3-1 down. It really signals that the side has turned a corner. That what they can beat when it really matters. They can beat the biggest teams in Europe. Simultaneously, of course, if they lose and don't get the don't produce the comeback tomorrow night, then questions have to be asked. What players have to be brought in to finally get this team over the line? What manager has to be brought in? I'd struggle to see Emery going beyond this season if they don't make it beyond this fixture. So it's a huge game. I'm in two minds as to whether it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing for PSG without having Neymar, which I know sounds quite a silly thing. It takes out that huge focus on it being Neymar's PSG. We saw him really struggle in that first leg, sort of living up to that bill. He was bringing his team, to the Bernabeu, and he really struggled, I thought. And he wasn't alone in that, but all the spotlight was on him, and he really, really struggled. So without that, maybe that there's the team feel a little bit freer. There's less onus perhaps on one individual player, and maybe they can do it. So on the flip side, of course, Neymar has the experience of producing, really, really putting in performances when it matters in the Champions League. You just have to look at the 6-1 win for when he was playing for Barcelona against PSG last season. So it's going to be another really intriguing tie. Hopefully, it's going to be a better footballing spectacle than the first leg. But I think there's big pressure on Di Maria.
Yeah, just a tad filling the boots of the man they expected, at least anyway, to be the one to sort of propel them into that Champions League space. But interestingly enough as well, with anything like injuries and stuff like that, comes opportunity really for anyone, Jez, and especially at this moment in time, being in somewhat of the shadow of Neymar in the past in this season, even though obviously he started a lot of games, he still scored plenty of goals. Kylian Mbappe, he has been announced that he's in the squad. He is fit and available to play against Madrid. There were worries after that injury that he picked up in the first game against Marseille, it turned out, and that it sort of exacerbated itself in the Coupe de France game. He was left out at the weekend, as well as seems a little more like a precaution now. But is this his time again, similar to what he did at Monaco, really, in the Champions League? Is it his time to shine?
Yeah, I think it could be. He's still had a solid, decent season so far, but I do think when Neymar's playing, not just Mbappe, but the whole team is. I think that they're a little bit too Neymar obsessed as well. I think the first thing anyone does is look to give the ball to Neymar, which is fair enough. It's worked in the past. French players of 98 to 2000 often were quoted as saying, if we didn't know what to do, we gave it to Zidane because he'd know what to do. It's understandable. I think Neymar is also a little bit too Neymar obsessed, and I do think that holds them back. I think in the first leg, again, I think he set up a goal, but he also squandered a few chances with selfishness and trying to beat one man too many. So I think it could free up a few players, and I think Mbappe is one of them. I think he really is sort of, I think, a little bit starstruck by playing alongside Neymar, and as I said, also always looking to give the ball to him, often at Cavani's expense. So, and I think Mbappe's kind of doing himself down by doing that, because okay, he's not quite there yet, but we know that he's got the potential to be as big in a few years' time as Neymar is now. So definitely this is a fantastic chance for him to sort of grab the headlines that he was making this time last year, which maybe he's missed out on a little bit this year. I'm not saying that he's shown any signs that he's bothered about that, but it would be good to have him sort of right at the forefront and on the tip of everyone's tongue again, like he was after those Dortmund and Man City matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if whoever's listening to from our Twitter account that retweets all the quotes later on this week, Neymar is too Neymar obsessed, I think has to be one that we have to mention, because that perfectly sums up the Brazilian. But without him, and the scoreline as well being on aggregate, they've obviously got the away goal, but it's advantage 3 to Real Madrid, and a goal for them completely changes the complexion of the tie straight away, Rich, really. So it makes it more interesting to see what type of formation they try and go for. Do they stick with the 4-3-3 that's been doing okay? Is that maybe a little bit too safe against a Real Madrid side where they will need to score goals? Maybe put someone like Draxler in there, or Pastore, who have impressed in cameos in recent weeks as well. Both of them really have affected games when they needed to as well. Do they maybe try and risk it a little bit more? Maybe have that, and maybe even have like Lassana Diarra come back in as a defensive shield, or do they stick with Lo Celso? What kind of formation do you think will be best to succeed? Because it is on a knife edge, really, this game, for them at least anyway, knowing that one goal for Los Blancos can probably kill the tie dead.
Yeah, and I think it's that will be playing on their mind. I do think that they will be sticking with the 4-3-3. I do think Diarra will start. I think he will come in. He will act as that shield in front of the defence. It may free up Rabiot and Verratti just to be a little bit more energetic and a little bit more daring, maybe, in midfield. Because I think whilst it's important that they need to come out strong and positive, it's also important that they don't, if they concede an early goal, okay, it's not absolutely the end of the world, but it'd be very easy for the heads and younger players and perhaps the less experienced players in the team, for their heads to drop. In the case of Thiago Silva, perhaps even some of the more experienced players, for their heads to drop. But I also think that has to be taken into account. So I do think that they will start with the 4-3-3. I do think Diarra will come in. As much as I've enjoyed seeing Lo Celso get some game time, and he has played well in the league, you can't deny that he had a very poor first leg in Madrid. So I think Diarra will come in for him. So it'll be the 4-3-3. I think once they've then settled in, touch wood, no early goal will be conceded. They can then build from that. If they are starting to boss the game, they can perhaps then look to introduce someone like Draxler. They can perhaps look to introduce someone like Pastore to then push it on. And I don't think Emery should be afraid of making early changes. If he sees that the game, is settled and actually, Madrid seem to be coming to almost just play for just defending that 3-1 lead rather than coming out and trying to attack themselves, then yeah, he should be able to recognise that and tweak in game. But I do think stick with the 4-3-3 to begin with. It will hopefully then allow you to have an opening half hour or so where you can get a control of the game, and then you can then push on from there, because it is, it's only 2 goals to take us to extra time. 2 goals. Sorry, it's only 2 goals they need to actually take them through, provided they don't concede. So it's not an impossible task. So I think he can't be too adventurous. Someone says he can't also be too negative, but I do think a 4-3-3 with Diarra going in there would be how I would be looking to go into that match.
Yeah,
so I agree with the fact that they'll start with 4-3-3, but I think they'll go with Motta, because I think he provides not quite the same defensive rigor as Diarra, but certainly a decent amount. But I think he provides a little more creativity. So I reckon they'll start with him, give him basically as long as he's got until he's knackered. And then, depending on the position PSG are in there, either bring, hopefully, sort of, that they've got maybe a 2-0 lead or something, and you can bring Diarra in to try to close it up a little bit, or maybe replace Motta with a Pastore or a Draxler to go a little bit more offensive.
Yeah, it's the interesting balancing act, isn't it? Like you say, Rich, it sounds simple enough, but a 2-0 victory does help them in. But it's how you break down a side like Real Madrid that can sort of explode on you sometimes, really. I know they've had a lot of ups and downs this season, really, but they can really just spring a surprise on you when they need to win, and they can score goals. They've got goals all over the team. You look at, obviously, Benzema starting to maybe get a little bit better after a real dip this season. So was Ronaldo. Bale's got goals. You've got Asensio off the bench if he doesn't start. You've got Isco. You've got Modric and Kroos who are dangerous from deep areas as well. They're just a dangerous side. But I just feel like if you have a little bit of a go with them, you upset the apple cart a bit. If you try and press them early, they get a little bit shaky. They can sometimes be a bit too gung-ho in forward areas. You can counter on them through that, and a lot of teams have shown that this season. Maybe that's the kind of place they want to try and get their wheelhouse into. But the interesting side bit to this, really, Rich, is obviously the potential repercussions of a loss here, because obviously the Champions League is the big aim now. Really, the Ligue 1 is wrapped up. You would assume the Coupe de France is probably wrapped up, given the sides that are left in it as well. They're in the Coupe de la Ligue final as well against Monaco, so there's a very good chance that at least they can win there as well. So this is really the competition that they have absolute 100% focus on, as they probably did in the summer when they bought 2 players for a lot of money. But for Unai Emery especially, with that result that happened to Barcelona last season, which was frankly embarrassing for the club, really, it really pushed them back when it seemed like that was finally their stepping stone into the complete European elite. What are the repercussions of a loss against Real Madrid? Let's say if it's not, because you had to think if they did get it to extra time and then they lost an extra time, okay, they might forgive themselves. They weren't without Neymar, but say they try for it, they maybe lose 2-0 against Real Madrid. What possible repercussions could we be facing?
Well, if they don't progress from this, he's as nice a guy as he seems to be. I don't see a future, particularly for Emery at PSG. You know, he was brought in with the job of take this team to the next level. You know, Blanc built the foundations for what is obviously the grand plan of conquering Europe. Blanc built the foundations, found that the quarterfinals were his sort of limit. They brought Emery in to get them to that next level. Now, it's pretty unfortunate that, you know, they topped the group that had Bayern Munich in it, and then in the next, you know, the knockout round, they were drawn against Real Madrid. You know, that's pretty unfortunate, but it doesn't matter. You know, they would still be wanting to beat a team like Real Madrid at some point in that run. So the fact now he's failed twice, albeit, you know, one was freak circumstances against Barcelona, and the other is you're just picking a team who are, you know, as they've got as great a pedigree in Europe as any other team around. That's just the unfortunate luck of the draw. But you know, not being able to in 2 seasons now to take that team to that next level, I do think it will end up costing him his job. I think the caveat that I would give him, and what I think he's been unfortunate with, is I don't think he has necessarily been able to bring in the players. You know, he's an experienced manager who, you know, he's succeeded in the Europa League. He's not a bad manager. You know, he will have recognised that squad was desperate for defensive improvements, was desperate for a defensive midfielder at the start of this season. But decisions above and beyond him meant that actually we're going down the Neymar route. We're going down the Mbappe route. And all of a sudden, financial fair play means that you've got to wait until January for us to bring in Lassana Diarra on effectively a free transfer for your defensive midfield cover. Well, that wouldn't have been what Emery would have wanted. I almost guarantee it. So he's had his, you know, he's not been able to, I don't think, mould this side into what he would want if he was having more of a say. But of course, that's just the perils of you know, signing up to coach PSG. Is that the project that this team is it's not necessarily one for the manager to come in and make decisions. The manager just coaches the players that, you know, board level bring in for him to manage and coach. So it's a series of unfortunate circumstances on his behalf. He's not entirely faultless. I think he's you know, at times there have been a bit of tactical weakness to him, but it is an endless run of really bad luck, I think, especially in the Champions League, which means if they don't go through, I just don't see how he sticks around.
Yeah, it's in that kind of job, it's really, really tough. It is almost like, ironically, like Real Madrid, where if you're second everywhere, that's constituted as failure, really, at that kind of club. And twice for that to happen to Unai Emery, when many would have thought they should have won the league last season, at least with the quality they had over Monaco, and they didn't. They only ended up winning the cups. They were embarrassed in the Champions League. That sort of looms over them, even if they do win a domestic treble, because obviously Laurent Blanc got further in the competition and did get knocked out. But won every competition and was still fired. So Unai Emery will certainly be looking over his shoulder afterwards, and what plan comes next really in the summer, and how they try to recruit from there as well. But let's get a prediction now for this one, and I'll start with you, Jez. Jez, what do you think the score will be on the night and then on aggregate?
I can actually see it being 3-1 to PSG. My heart says 2-0 PSG. I've changed my mind a bit because around the time of the first leg, I thought that PSG would win it overall. I'm just worried that third goal the other day was a killer. I'm going to say, I know I've already given two completely different scores, but I'm going to say my head says 2-1 PSG, and they'll just go out by the odd goal.
Rich?
I was also going to go for a 2-1 PSG win. I can't see PSG keeping a clean sheet. I don't know. There's something there that just tells me they'll win on the night, but I don't see them going through. So in the spirit of not copying Jez, I'm going to go with a 3-2 PSG win.
In the spirit that Jez seemed to read my mind, I'm also going for a 2-1 win for Paris Saint-Germain. It does feel like that, doesn't it? It feels like Paris Saint-Germain probably have enough and will have enough belief to get themselves probably even into a 2-0 lead where you're thinking maybe this is on for them, and then maybe Real Madrid just snatch that goal, or maybe Real Madrid score early and just sort of let Paris Saint-Germain do what they need because they've essentially won it with that result in hand. But it'll be an intriguing game at the Parc des Princes tomorrow. I'm sure many eyes will be eagerly on that game.
I agree. I agree with Rich that I think if they get knocked out, that's probably Emery done. And I'm not entirely sure that would be undeserved. But also, as Rich said, the problems, as far as I'm concerned, the problems are higher up than Emery, and it should be, although he'll get all the blame, there's other people that should be falling on their sword, because I think the recruitment in the summer, 2 huge stellar names, that's fine, but that was never what was needed by PSG. And the first leg, it was clear to see the problems weren't, although they didn't have their best game going forward, the problems were further back, and they were problems that everyone's known about for a couple of years now, and nothing's done about it.
Yeah, it'd be intriguing to see what happens in the summer. Should obviously, because I assume they'll let him see out the rest of the season at least. But it'll be interesting if they do lose, or if they do win, in fact, and see if that next stage brings even more pressure to it, and he's still being on the edge of his seat. Really, that he still needs to progress, and where ending up anything other than the final, really, whether any of that will be worthy of him staying. But let's talk about Ligue 1 matters at least now, and just below Paris Saint-Germain in the table this weekend. So another bit of separation, really, in that battle for the second automatic Champions League place, with Monaco winning as Lyon and Marseille both drew. So they finally have a little bit of a gap now with the reigning champions to Richer. They've made it 4 points now ahead of Marseille, and several more against Lyon, who dropped off quite a bit. But does it feel with both of the teams already having faced Monaco that they might be out of sight really now? They've still got Paris Saint-Germain to come, so there's a chance there maybe. But Monaco feel like now, with the other two starting to stumble, having European commitments themselves as well, this maybe feels like the Monegasque are going to pull away.
I think so. I think what we're now seeing is the benefits of having a very, very strong squad. I think there's been shortcomings in both the Lyon and Marseille squads that just haven't existed for Monaco. You know, there were maybe question marks when Falcao picked up the injury that's kept him out for a few weeks of, well, are they going to get the goals? Well, that question's been emphatically answered. You've had Steven Jovetic come in, who's proved a more than adequate replacement. You've had Ronnie Lopez, who's been playing very, very well so far this season, who's now adding goals to his game as well. It's just a very, very strong squad, and ultimately that's what's going to prove key. You know, we've seen with Marseille that, yeah, in Florian Thauvin, they've got probably arguably one of the best players this season. There's still major problems with that defence. They're still reliant on central defenders who I just don't think are up to the task. Although their fullbacks try very, very hard, I can't fault them for their effort. I just question again whether the quality is there. And then with Lyon, I'm broken record time. I'm afraid there's no plan B. If plan A is, well, Fekir produced some kind of moment of magic and Mariano Diaz will stick it in the back of the net, that seems to be plan A. And then when that doesn't work, or Fekir's out injured, or Mariano Diaz is not particularly interested, there's nothing. There's nothing. And there's too much reliance on the likes of Aouar, the likes of Ndombele, that the likes of Depay are just too inconsistent. His head is either in the game and he's a world beater, it seems at times, but too often it's not in the game and he's disinterested, and it affects the team. He's not the only one like that. Mariano Diaz can be guilty of that. Bertrand Traoré can be guilty of that. I don't think when Fekir has played, whether it's a question of whether he's fully fit or not, I don't think Fekir of late has been particularly excellent. Certainly shadow of the form that he was showing in the early part of the season. Whereas Monaco have just gone about grinding out those results and in an impressive manner as well. I think it's 13 games now without a defeat in the league, which not even PSG can cope with that run at the moment. So it's just showing you the benefits of spending that bit of money, building up a really strong squad, so that if you need a plan B, you've got a plan B. You've got quality throughout, the entire starting 11. If players pick up injuries, you've got players to come in. So it really is showing the benefit of that and the importance of that. And you can only hope for the competitive nature of the league that in the summer, Lyon and Marseille take note of that and look to build on what are starting blocks of decent teams, but by no means the finished article.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this feels like Monaco, I mentioned it, I think, a couple of weeks ago, like a Monaco side that they constantly get better in the second halves of seasons, I think. And the players that they brought in the summer are starting to integrate, like you say, squad-wise. I think Ronnie Lopez has really stepped up his game this season. In the last couple of games, that game against Lyon, I remember he was excellent. He was good in this one as well. He's scoring goals. He's adding sort of an extra attacking line to them as well. They look really good. Jovetic was excellent in the game at the weekend. He really added to their attacking play and scored a nice goal as well. They just have a little bit more than it feels like they had earlier in the season, Jez, where they really struggled for consistency. But now the players are starting to settle. Now they're having a settled sort of formation that they're getting used to. Tielemans is coming better. Balde's coming better. Jovetic. They're all starting to grow into roles into the team as well. Does this feel like a Monaco side that arguably, with a couple more players in the summer, that can at least mount some kind of challenge against Paris Saint-Germain next season?
You'd hope so. I'd still say PSG start as comfortable favourites, but then I would have said that last season as well. I think again it depends a lot on what Monaco do in the summer. Do they keep the players they've got? Are they going to do another big overhaul? I've said before, I think it was no coincidence that the one summer of the last 4 or 5 or so where they didn't change things around too much was the summer. The following season was the season that they won the league. As you both said, Monaco sort of been getting better and better as yet again another sort of totally revamped squad has bedded in. And Jovetic started a little shakily. I think he's looked fantastic the last month or so. The quality and the different range of his finishes, from little chips to I loved his finish of the first goal against Bordeaux, although he was kind of easily put through with a brilliant ball from Lamar. I thought it was just very calmly done, clinically just inside the near post. Balde's doing his bit. Lopez, as you said, to be honest, I've never been that convinced about him, but this season he's really gone on to another level, and he's not quite Bernardo Silva standards, but he's certainly done his bit to make sure that Silva isn't too um, too massively missed on that right wing. So I think Jardim is a fantastic manager. I think he's got to be, although he's getting props, he's got to be one of the most underrated managers in the world, I think, for what he's doing season after season. And yeah, I think I said last week that if Lyon had Garcia as manager, they'd be out of sight. I think really that's the big difference with the three clubs. I think Marseille have got the weakest of of those three squads, but are doing well because of Garcia. I think Lyon squad rivals Monaco's, but Genesio is not getting the best out of them. Jardim is getting the best and more out of his squad. The players play for him, they improve under him, and if he's given the chance to work with the same set of players for more than one season, then I think they are the ones that are going to challenge PSG the closest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made an excellent point there, Jez, about Leonardo Jardim. And I worry that he's maybe the one that is the big summer loss of the summer. I know that Thomas Lemar looks like he's out of the door. Probably Fabinho will probably go as well, which are massive losses to the squad. But I don't think anyone is as important to Monaco as Leonardo Jardim. And clubs, if they set their managers, I'm thinking in England, you're thinking Chelsea and Arsenal, possibly the latter, at least anyway, they should do. But you think of also Paris Saint-Germain might think about Leonardo Jardim. He's obviously knows the French league very well, so he'd be able to set up there and has shown qualities in the Champions League, getting Monaco so far last season. You think of other teams in Europe that might be looking for managers, Borussia Dortmund maybe, Real Madrid might be looking for a new manager as well. He's going to be highly, highly sought after, if you think, because... Go ahead.
I was going to say, you just wonder whether there'd be a job swap on with PSG. Send if Jardim does leave and PSG snap him up, would Emery work with that Monaco team where he'd have more say on the squad? He can bring in the players that he wants. There's the money is there to bring in the players that he wants. He'll be able to work with the players day in, day out. They're players who respect their coach, which I think sometimes is lacking at PSG. As I said before, the Emery is not a bad coach. It just doesn't seem that he's the right fit for PSG. I'd be quite interested if Jardim was to leave. I'd be quite interested to see Emery at Monaco.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting, won't it? I think in the summer, if Leonardo Jardim and the other thing I think people would point to is possibly Fabinho going with him, possibly as a defensive midfielder for a Paris Saint-Germain side that would look really good with those two in charge, you would think, if that were to happen. But let's talk about the team just below Monaco, and they saved their own skin despite, quote unquote, every Marseille fan saying the 12th man, really, Jez. It was a bit of a strange game, really, that didn't really seem into the game that much, and then scored a cracker through Leo Dubois, although again the Marseille fans will suggest that the strange block on Payet by the referee, clearly accidental, affected the 30 seconds afterwards when Nantes ended up putting the ball in the back of the net. But they really struggled to get a foothold. In fairness, maybe should have had, well, almost certainly should have had a penalty for Diego Carlos, but in sympathy to the referee, it's not the easiest thing to spot from that kind of distance. But Thauvin eventually bundles one over the line to keep them just about in that race for second, because they are 4 points off Monaco now, and they still have Lyon to come in a couple of weeks' time as well. It's an interesting one for the last couple of weeks, really, for Marseille, since before that Paris Saint-Germain game, obviously, the one before against, you think of the one against Bordeaux, they were pretty turgid again. Against Saint-Etienne, they sort of switched off a little bit. After that Metz win, where they played really well, and the Monaco draw as well, they've sort of settled back into that rhythm that they had at the start of the season, which was they never really seemed to press on the gas, did they?
I know I sound like a stuck record. I'm just consistently unimpressed with this Marseille team, and sadly, I think it probably says a lot about the lack of quality in this year's Liga that they're up there. I think that the Thauvin goal was, I think, their first goal in about 450 minutes of football. I just saw a tweet saying they scored once in their last 54 attempts on goal, and the forward line is really their strong point. It doesn't surprise me that they're going through a tough period, because I think probably the really long unbeaten run was a little bit flattering for them. But in their defence, it was a brilliant run. They can only beat what's in front of them, and they did that on a consistent basis. And considering it's not a big squad, so the same players are playing week in, week out, you've got to hand it to them, and it's not surprising that they're showing a little bit of tiredness now. And coming off the back of 2-3-0 defeats to PSG, I mean, maybe it's a bit unfair, but you could draw a parallel with Arsenal coming off the back of 2-3-0 defeats to Man City. Arsenal look, I know there's obviously a lot of other factors, but they looked a completely spent force yesterday, whereas at least Marseille did react. But I think they were relatively lucky too. I think Nantes were, to me, by far the better team. PSG, I don't think, had a shot on target till after the hour mark. And until they scored, it looked like it was just, the closest they got was a couple of speculative overhead kicks from Payet. In their defence, they absolutely should have had a penalty. The handball, I'm not convinced about the push on Rolando, but the handball was, as blatant as it gets, and it was a pretty bad decision. But then it evened out, because, I think the Marseille goal, first of all, was pretty bad sportsmanship from Payet not throwing the ball back to Nantes. And then I think there was a clear foul on Palois in the build-up to the goal as well. So, all this 12th man stuff, I know everything with Marseille fans is black or white. There's no grey area. Everyone's got it in for us. The referee misses one thing out, so it's obviously this huge conspiracy. 11 against 12. It's ridiculous. Marseille, as one of the big teams, get as many, if not more, decisions going their way as anyone else. But it happens in matches, and good for them for showing the character to come back. But the match in 2 weeks, Lyon against Marseille, is absolutely massive, because they're two teams who are not particularly playing well at the moment, and it's a big match. Arguably, it's a big match for Monaco, because they'll be looking for a draw, which buys them a little bit more space, especially because they've still got PSG to play. But the fact that this Marseille team and this Lyon team, one of them is going to qualify for Europe or for the Champions League, is actually slightly depressing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a strange one the last couple of weeks, but you also give them an interesting one, thinking that in the Europa League they've got an interesting tie against Athletic Bilbao, who've had a pretty terrible season, really, and you also think that with Lyon in the foreground, really, week 30 on a couple of weeks' time, if they get a victory there, then pretty much you would think that spot is sealed, really, Rich, for fourth at least, which third at least anyway, sorry, and that would be Champions League football, which would be absolutely massive for them, really. So while they may be looking likely that they probably won't really catch Monaco in second place, this is by no means a bad season for Marseille, and really a step forward for this quote-unquote Champions project.
It is a step forward. I don't think many Marseille fans would say we were going to finish top three. I think if they're being truly honest with that squad, I think they've been aided by several other teams significantly underperforming. But as just said, they've for the most part, they have beaten what's been put in front of them. They still need to try and work out what this hoodoo is against playing against the very top sides, where they just can't seem to get a performance. And the players that I have begrudgingly praised so far this season disappear and make me think, well, why have I just defended them? But it would be a very, very big achievement, I think, to finish in the top three. I would also add, though, that I think there's a missed opportunity here. I pointed out, I sort of suggested just before the January transfer window opened, there are a number of key areas I thought that Marseille needed to improve and add to in the January transfer window. To think, why not go for second? I don't think they were anticipating a possibility for a second place finish, but January, it was there. It was there for the taking. If they'd have added those kind of players that they needed, shoring up that defence, perhaps adding a little bit more creativity in midfield, and certainly adding a better striker than they did add with Mitroglou, they could have had second wrapped up by now. I genuinely believe that, but they haven't, and so it may be a case of, as I say, a missed opportunity. I do think they could have had second if they had actually recruited sensibly in January. So as good as a top three finish would be, I would argue that actually, had they shown a bit more ambition, it could have been better.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think you'd have snapped your hand off many Marseille fans if you would have handed them third at the start of the season. But at the same time, with that sniff of possibly being second, a club that size as well must have been desperate for it, really. But someone who attention definitely is turning to the Europa League, at least anyway, is Lyon, because it always seemed like a mismatch really at the weekend against the Montpellier side, one of the best defensive sides in Ligue 1 by quite some way, really. It's only really PSG, and only by about 3 goals that they're better than by. They really crippled Lyon. They forced them to shots from long range, which too many Lyon players are all too eager to do. And without Nabil Fekir, they really lacked a little bit of creativity. They were maybe a little bit lucky, really, to get themselves back into the game. And Montpellier were really good in spells, and especially in the first half, looked like a dangerous side. But their focus now, especially really, Jez, with that gap to Monaco, Monaco getting extremely large to the point where second is pretty much not an option. So there's no automatic Champions League spot really, unless they somehow claw back that 9-point gap. But it's a 5-point gap to Marseille, really. They have a 10-point gap to Rennes, so they do have some kind of safety net at least to qualify for the Europa League next season. But the Europa League this season, with obviously ending at Parc OL, is the focus now, isn't it, surely?
I'll give you a definitive answer after Marseille-Lyon. I mean, if they win that, then they're right back in it. But the way the last six matches have gone, Marseille are really strong favourites, and I think the match is at Marseille. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
Double check that. Yeah. So Marseille are certainly favourites for that one. I'd say Lyon's priority has got to be Europa League now, partly because it's being played at their ground. They had such a great run last year. It would be great for them to go at least one step further. And obviously, should they win it, there's the promise of Champions League football at the end. But it's such a tough competition this year with the teams that are left. Even with Napoli, who I thought were one of the strongest out, and you've got teams like Atletico Madrid and I think Lazio maybe is still in it, and Dortmund, Arsenal even, or Arsenal or AC Milan. Whoever wins that has got to feel confident as well. So it's going to be tough for them, but I think it's entirely their fault that's got to be their priority now, because following that Lyon win, which the PSG win, which they absolutely deserved, it looked like that should have set them up for a really confident end to the season, and it's just collapsed from there.
Yeah, it's been pretty spectacular, really, the collapse. I think after that PSG game, if you'd have said that they would have gone on a run in Ligue 1, at least the way they didn't win in 6 games, drawing against Saint-Etienne and Lille and giving up leads, but they didn't really look like they were ever going to get anything from this one, Rich, in terms of at least winning the game, especially in the second half. It was a pretty tepid affair, really. Montpellier, very, very good defensive side, and I think they've got some excellent promise and players that certainly a lot of clubs will look at in the summer. But it's a frustrating end, really, to what feels like, at least anyway, an end already to Lyon's season. Yes, they maybe might be able to possibly catch Marseille if they win that game at the Velodrome, but that's still a relatively big ask, really. Do you think that really, even if they do overhaul Marseille, possibly even, or do win the Europa League, they need to consider Genesio's position in the summer?
As much as I like him, as much as I like what he has done more behind the scenes, I suppose, prior to his taking over as head coach. Yeah, I think they need to. I think if they're really to look at trying to keep track and keep up the pace with the likes of Monaco and maybe even push on and try and challenge PSG, then a new coach is something they're going to have to look at sooner rather than later. It's a talented squad they've got. There's no doubt about it. You know, they've got Martin Terrier to come in the summer. They've got Leo Dubois, seemingly that's going to come in as well. They've got talented players coming in. They're still an attractive side for young players, primarily in France, but also abroad. There's a little bit of money there as well, as seen with the amount that they put out for Terrier. They just don't seem to have that coach that can mould those players. And as much as I criticise the players and I criticise the likes of Memphis for letting their heads drop, a better coach doesn't necessarily let that happen. So I think his position will be looked at in the summer. There's a lot of potential outcomes that can happen between now and the end of the season. You know, they could still snatch I agree that second is out of the running for them. They could still take third. They could still make it to the final, maybe even win the Europa League if they get the draw right. But of course, they might not. They might not do that. They might finish fourth. I would also point out, as wildly optimistic as that may be, if you look at the last 4 or 5 games, I think Rennes have taken 10 points and Lyon taken 3. You know, although it's a 9 or 10 point lead that Lyon have, you know, it's not absolutely nailed on that they're going to be top 4. They have to be careful. If this rot continues, who's to say that well, it's not going to take long for that lead to be overhauled. It was far, far more only a few weeks ago. So Genesio, yeah, as much as a likable guy he is, that he is part of the Lyon sort of culture that they've generated of promoting from within and bringing through the ranks. If you're Olas, you've got to accept that if you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And unfortunately, it appears that Genesio's just not quite good enough.
Yeah, I think it's felt like that for a while, really, and Lyon fans will probably sort of agree with that now that it's maybe them not doing enough. And I think that this might be the last time we sort of talk about this fight for second. At least I think it feels like it's probably over really now. I think all those 3 sides will probably end up finishing where they are. But time for a new section now that will be running until the end of the season, and that's the plane to Russia, which is looking at a player from a particular team or obviously a Frenchman, at least anyway, who is on sort of the borderline of the squad. Is he going? Is he staying? We want to make the case for them. So one will be for, one will be against. Tonight's player is Manchester United's Anthony Martial, and I will remain relatively quiet because I have a clear bias over this one, really. So I will try not to get involved too much, but I will start with you, Rich, who is our player against Anthony Martial. So give me one of your reasons why he shouldn't be on the plane to Russia.
For me, it's a question of, has he actually done enough with Manchester United this season? He still hasn't nailed on the absolute, one of the first names on the sheet starting in the starting 11. Yes, I will concede that when he has been brought into the squad, more often or not, he has produced something. But I think there are far more players more deserving, who are playing regularly, who are still producing, who can produce then on the big stage as well. So my concern is that he's not done enough at club level by not being that guaranteed starter. Whether that's his fault, whether that's Mourinho's fault, is perhaps another argument for another time. But that would be a big point against him.
And that's an interesting one angle to take, Rich. But Jez, Anthony Martial at the same time, while not being a starter, and he has been in the last couple of weeks at least anyway, he looked like he was probably going to start tonight, although injury and has ruled him out really of that one, and just Lingard started in his space. But there is a lot of competition at Manchester United, which is why he has had some issues, and he's obviously also been sometimes absent from the squad. Sometimes there's been rumours that he's maybe looking to leave or not sign a new contract, etc., which is other things. But he has been good when he has played. I mean, 12 goals, 7 assists this season as well, and about half of his appearance from the bench as well. He's been an impact player regardless, hasn't he?
Yeah, you've pretty much done my job for me. Well, actually, I mean, Richard said quite a lot of the positive points as well. I mean, you can argue that there isn't a better recommendation for you as a young, exciting striker than being dropped by Mourinho. When you look at some of the other attacking talents that Mourinho hasn't trusted before, like De Bruyne and Salah and people like that, and how they're thriving, that's as good a reference as you're going to get, not being trusted by him. So, I do think that a lot of it is down to Mourinho not giving him enough game time. But when he's been given the chances, he's taken them brilliantly. I think he's got just in the Premier League alone. I think I've worked out he's got 9 goals and 5 assists in about 1,300 minutes, which is only around 14 full matches worth of time. And I think it equates to being directly involved in a goal every 96 minutes, something like that. You're not going to find many players who have got a better record than that. And I think it's also a testament to his character, because after the Euros, where again he was more of a bit part player, but his confidence was so low. When Deschamps did give him a chance in the group stages, he did nothing. Then going back to Man United, where he wasn't really being given such a chance, to work hard to break his way into the first team reckoning, I think already shows how he's matured as a player. And then you'll know better than me about what's going on sort of behind the scenes in Man United, but it seems from the outside that he's pretty much getting his head down. Yeah, possibly he wants to move away, which is understandable, but he's getting his head down, and when he gets that chance, he takes it. And arguably he deserves more first team chances than he's getting. But I'm not necessarily saying he should start for France, but as a member of the squad who's proved that he can come on and turn matches, I think there's a very strong case for him. And when you look at the sort of the situation of some of the wide players, there's Coman, who's just been operated on and possibly not even going to get back to fitness in time for the World Cup. There's Dembele, who's got his injury problems and hasn't quite settled at Barcelona yet. Thauvin, granted, is having a fantastic season, but goes completely missing when he plays anyone better than Ligue 1 mid-table standard. So, Martial has proved over a reasonable amount of time that he can do it against top teams. He's proved that he can do it for France. I think he's a pretty safe bet to have in the squad.
Yeah, I make the interesting. We'll come on to this in a moment, but I don't think we can all predict how Jose Mourinho is thinking this season. I didn't try to enter his mind, to be fair, because might be a languid there for a few places. But that is an argument, really. You can place upon him, Rich, that he's not played a lot of football, and at the same time, he's got a lot of competition for his place. There's a lot of players in his position.
Absolutely. I mean, that would probably be my strongest argument against him. And I would caveat that this is not in any way, me saying that I don't think he's a good player. I do really rate him. But my biggest argument that he's not is I don't know whose place he takes in that squad. There are so many options that you look at if you're going to play him down the left, you look at, well, is that potentially where Mbappe's going to play? Is that where Lamar's going to play? Could you play him a bit more centrally? Well, then there's other players that can play there. Do you completely left field and stick him out on the right? Well, then you're into potentially Dembele territory, potentially Coman territory, potentially Tovan territory. I think just the sheer competition, combined with the fact that perhaps unlike a lot of those other players, he isn't a full regular member of the starting 11 at club level. I don't know. I don't know whose place he takes in that side. I really don't. And as good a player as he is, there are still other players who are playing at an equal level, but also playing more regularly, who are in that squad. I think it's a lot more difficult. Although he's been in perhaps the last couple, Deschamps will obviously always have his favourites, and it's going to prove very difficult, I think, to knock out, if you like, one of those favourites. If those favourites are still playing well and still, play pretty well at international level as well, it just makes that argument of, well, who do you drop? Especially as this isn't just a friendly squad. This isn't just a qualifier. This is for your World Cup squad. I don't know if I could make a big enough argument to drop or have Martial take the place of one of those players I've previously named.
Yeah, and an interesting one, really, I would make a point about this, Jez, is that a lot of the players that are possibly going on the plane, that you look at Mbappe, Dembele, Lamar, Coman if he's fit, but it looks like it might be an injury, might hold him out. Fekir, look at other wide men in those areas. Tovan, they're all starters for their clubs. Could being somewhat of an impact sub this season be an advantage to a French squad that when you need an injection, bring on Martial?
I think it could be, in the sense that that's the role he's been playing all season, and that's the role that he'd be playing in the World Cup squad. There are players that are effective from the bench. There are players who need to be playing from the first minute to have an impact. And I realise it sounds crazy to say that someone should be punished for being a regular starter, but that does fit a certain profile. Martial has done it for a lot of this season. He's changed games when he's come on, and that's what international managers should be looking for from squad members. If they're not likely to start, they shouldn't just be there to put out the cones in training. They should be there because they need to be relied on to change matches. In Euro 2000, I think every substitution that Le Maire made in the knockout stages turned matches. They all created goals, certainly in the final. And if Deschamps can replicate that could be the difference between winning the trophy and not. And if Martial has already shown all through the season that he can be trusted to do that, that could be something in his favour.
Yeah. Let's bookend this talk really about Martial, and let's have a bit of a decision then now. And I'll start with you, Richard, and this more honest, obviously, between the two of you. Do you think that he will be on the plane to Russia, or do you think he might be someone who just misses out?
Contrary to my arguments, I do think he will be on that plane. I can see exactly where you're coming from, and I think probably the strongest argument for taking him is that impact sub. And as you say, by not being a regular starter, by having to prove himself coming off the bench, I do think that's probably going to tip the scales into his favour. So yes, I think, contrary to my arguments, which I do stand by, I do still think, though, that he will end up going.
Jez?
I feel like saying contrary to my arguments, which I stand by, I don't think he will. I think it turns on Coman. I think there's only a certain number of wingers. Although Thauvin hardly played for France, I think his season has probably earned him a place. So I think if Coman can come back and show his fitness, Deschamps likes him, I think he'll be in the squad. If he doesn't, which seems likely, then I think Martial could be taking his place.
Yeah, I just have a feeling that he will make it. Does he merit it? It's borderline, isn't it? Depending on the the players that are available. If, like you say, Jez, if Coman's available with his form for Bayern Munich this season, he probably goes. Does maybe Dembele fall out of the equation because he's not necessarily performed a lot for Barcelona? He has had a couple of injuries as well. It's a weird toss-up. We'll have to see sort of more towards the time, but he is probably, more than anyone, the most borderline player we could have picked to start off this new section. But we'll finish tonight, as usual, with our Liga and snapshots. And I'll start with you, Rich, and what's your snapshot this week?
Mine's got a Saint-Etienne slant to it. The game against Dijon at the weekend saw the 300th appearance for Saint-Etienne of goalkeeper Stéphane Ruffier, and the 400th appearance for sort of club legend, if you like, Loic Perrin. There was a magnificent tifo before the game to sort of honour the captain. So great achievements for both. I do caveat Perrin's with the fact of it is looking as though the end is not too far off, with perhaps age getting the better of him, with injuries now becoming a bit more regular. He's not looking the player that he once was, but he has been, without a doubt, a terrific servant to that club.
Jez, what's your Liga snapshot this week?
Believe it or not, it was going to be that as well. So instead, I will say, I'll be biased and say Nolan Roux scoring and now overtaking Mbappe in the all important Roux versus Mbappe goal scoring charts.
Yeah, that's everything. Everyone's keeping an eye on that chart this season, aren't they? Definitely. I've got two. Well, one is from that game, ironically, Jez, and it's probably the miss of the season from Andy Delors. The ball goes across in the last minutes, and he's next to the goal. He attempts to sort of casually side foot it with the outside of his right foot, and it goes blazing over the bar from 2 yards out. Unbelievable, couldn't believe it. And finally, the moment I suppose everyone was tenderly waiting on Twitter, at least for on Saturday afternoon, and that was the debut of Timothy Weah, son of George Weah, who was such a terrific player in his prime. He was an absolute joy to watch. And if his son can be half the player he is, well, what a talent Paris Saint-Germain could have. We were all begging for him to come on. We saw the first substitute, and it was, I think, Thiago Motta came on. We're going, that's not the substitute we want to see. And then they brought on they brought on another substitute, and it wasn't Timothy Weah. And there was about 20 minutes left, and you go you have three attackers in that team. You have pretty much you're playing Alves at right wing by this point. We go, please just bring him on. And with about a couple of minutes left, they give him a go, and he almost scores as well, which it would have been a terrific end for him. But great to see the USA international, well, youth international at least anyway, get his shot. Maybe in the summer he might get a loan move, hopefully to a Ligue 1 team. That would be nice to see. Could
I just jump in and just add one more very, very quick one, Saint-Etienne related as well, is that Mathieu Debuchy has been it's one of the final three nominated for Player of the Month. I don't think many would have perhaps seen that after his sort of dismal time with Arsenal. But yeah, after a really, really good start to life back this side of the channel, couple of goals. He's been nominated as Liga and Player of the Month alongside, I think, Neymar and I missed it, might have been Ronnie Lopez. So quite a remarkable turnaround. And as Matt Sparrow alluded to today, does that put him back in contention for the World Cup spot? We'll see.
I think it should, but for another week, I guess.
Yeah, it's be an interesting one, won't it? That's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Rich, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday. But for now, the main show at least will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.